In this video, we're going to learn about sex-linked inheritance. Sex-linked genes are located on the X chromosome. Remember, humans have 46 chromosomes in 23 pairs. The first 22 pairs are called autosomes because auto for self. They are chromosomes that basically contain genes that help you make a fully functioning human that aren't influenced by sex. However, the last pair of chromosomes, the 23rd pair, is the sex chromosomes. And the sex chromosomes, XX in females and XY in males, contain genes that help you function as a human, but they're also influenced by one's sex. Females get 2 copies of the X chromosome, whereas males only get 1. Because males and females have different numbers of X chromosomes, they inherit genes on the X chromosome differently. So let's talk a little bit about notation for sex-linked traits. We write these out because we're looking at these genes on the X chromosome. We put them as kind of like superscript, almost like little exponents, to show that they're attached to the X chromosome. So for example, in this case, X big H might mean that you have the healthy allele, whereas X little h might mean that you have a specific genetic disorder such as hemophilia, which is a clotting disorder in the blood. So this individual here, this female, she has 1 X chromosome with a healthy allele attached and 1 X chromosome with the hemophilia allele attached. Males only get 1 X chromosome. So this man has just 1 copy of the healthy allele. His Y chromosome, notice, there is nothing attached to it because the hemophilia gene, that clotting factor gene, is found on the X chromosome, not the Y chromosome. Let's go back and look at this karyotype to see. So notice that the X chromosome is much larger than the Y chromosome. That is because the X chromosome has a lot of genes on it that help make a functioning human. So there's genes like we just learned for clotting factors in your blood, for color vision, for proper muscular development. So there's a lot of genes on that X chromosome. The Y chromosome is much smaller, and it has genes that are mainly related to maleness. So genes that make an individual a man versus a female. So we focus on sex-linked. Think of it as X-linked. Okay, so we're focusing on the X chromosome. So because women get 2 X chromosomes, whereas men only get 1, we see that there are different possible genotypes that they can have. Females have 3 possible genotypes, whereas males have just 2. All right, so let's look at an example of red-green color blindness. This circle of red, yellow, and green dots is a color blindness test. Now, if you're colorblind, you have difficulty differentiating between the colors of all of those dots. And you may not notice that there is a number hidden inside this test. So in this case, the number 16 is hidden in the test. If you have red-green color vision, you can differentiate between those colors and you can see that number. So in this case, normal vision is going to be our dominant allele, X big N, and color blindness is going to be X little n. So let's make sure we understand our genotypes and our phenotypes. So let's start off with females. Females can have 3 possible genotypes. Now, because they're female, we always start with XX. And then we have to write down what's on the X chromosome. So one possibility would be to have dominant alleles. We would say that individual is a homozygous dominant female. Because she has 2 normal vision alleles, she is a normal female, which I'm going to abbreviate with the symbol. So notice, I don't just say phenotype normal vision. I also include whether she's male or female because with sex-linked traits, we're essentially following two traits at a time. In this case, color vision and the sex of the individual. The next option would be heterozygous, X big N, X little n. She would also have normal vision, and she would be a normal female because she has the dominant allele. However, we would call her a carrier. She carries the recessive allele. So she herself has normal vision, but she could potentially have children who have color blindness. The last option, a rare option, is a colorblind female. She would have to receive two recessive alleles. So we're going to say, I don't have enough room to write it all out, so I'm just going to call her a blind female. Now, it's rare because she would have to receive two recessive alleles, one from her mother and one from her father, in order to be colorblind. So it's going to be a much lower rate of occurrence than with males. Males, on the other hand, they are XY. We're going to write down what their possible genotypes are. There's only two. They could have the dominant allele. Again, nothing on the Y chromosome, so this would be a normal male. And then the other option would be a colorblind male because he has one allele. So notice, because males only have to get one X chromosome, they're going to get it more often than females who have to have two copies of an X chromosome with a recessive allele in order to show the trait. So let's do a sample problem, and we're going to continue on with color blindness. So we had X big N was normal, and X little n would be colorblind. You could pick whatever letter you wanted to use attached to your X chromosome. That's up to you. So we have a woman who is a carrier for color blindness, so that means she is heterozygous. So she is X big N, X little n, and marries a normal man. So he is XY, and he has a normal allele on his one X chromosome. So we want to know first, what's the probability they're going to have a child that's colorblind? So let's fill in the squares, and let's talk a little bit about what each of these children, what traits they have. So first, we are going to look at the top row. Those are both females. We have a normal female, and we have another normal female. This female happens to be a carrier. However, she would have normal vision, so we call her a normal female. The males, we have one normal male, and we have one colorblind male. So let's look first at this problem. What is the probability they will have a child who is colorblind? So if we're looking at child, we have to look at the entire Punnett square and look at all four possible children they could have. When we do that, we would see that there is just 1 out of 4. Okay, so our first answer is 1/4, or if you wanted to, you could say 25%. It doesn't say how it wants its probability, so percentages or fractions would be fine. All right, next up, they're having a son. What is the probability that he will be colorblind? All right, so in this case, we have to read carefully. We're not looking at all the children. Now we're just focusing on the sons. Okay, so they know they're having a son. So we're ignoring the female children. What's the probability he will be colorblind? So of a son, he has 2 chances. He could either be X big NY or X little ny. If he's X little ny, 1 out of 2, he is colorblind. So in this case, it is a half or 50% chance. Okay, now the next thing, they're having a daughter. What's the probability she will be colorblind? Okay, so now we're just looking at the daughters. And in this case, the daughters, neither of them are colorblind. So it's 0. Right? If I had changed it and I said they're having a daughter, what's the probability she will be a carrier? Okay, then I would need to look more closely at it and say, oh, this box is a carrier. And so that would be a half a chance. Okay, so you have to read carefully. Are we dealing with all the children, or are we dealing with some of the children based on their sex? All right, so let's look at pedigrees with sex-linked inheritance. So we're looking at sex-linked recessive inheritance. So sex-linked recessive, first off, sex-linked, many more males are affected than females. So in this case, they went ahead and colored in their carriers to stress the point that carriers could potentially pass it on to their offspring. So in this case, we have colored in blue affected males and colored in circles are affected females. So let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 males have red-green color blindness. Okay, if it was autosomal, we would see about 6 females affected. We do not have 6 solid colored in affected females. Instead, we have just 1. So 1 affected female. So because males and females are not equal, we have much more males who are affected than females are affected. That is a clue that it is sex-linked. Another clue that it is sex-linked recessive is that it often skips generations through carrier females. So I picked this pedigree to use because it already identified them as carriers, so it was easier to kind of follow through and see that carriers can pass it on to their sons. So here you can see generation 1, we have a sick father, and then in the next generation it skips. No one is completely solid, but there are carrier females, and those carrier females can then pass it on to the next generation. So we had 1 affected individual here, no affected individuals here, 3 affected individuals there. Okay, and then in the last one we have 2 affected individuals. So it's skipping over generations. We wouldn't necessarily see that in a dominant trait. Now, so skipping generations, that's what lets you know it's recessive. There are X-linked dominant traits. They're incredibly rare, and so we are not going to focus on them in this kind of video. All right, so let's fill in some of these genotypes to make sure that we're good. We're going to use our same notation we used before. So it's easy to fill in anyone that's colored. So in this case, X little n y for any of the males who have it. Okay, so you would have a lot of filling in to do with X little n y's. Females that have it are very rare, but we do have one. So she is X little n, so she's homozygous recessive. Anyone who's empty takes a little bit more work. You have to figure out, are they going to be homozygous or are they going to be carriers for females? And for males, it's really easy. Males, you know, there's only one option. So any empty square, you know, has to be X big N Y, because that's the only option. So females are a little harder to determine. So let's look at some of these and let's figure out why they're half shaded blue. So why are they considered to be carriers? Well, here is a normal, let's look at Roman numeral 2, 6 and 7. Okay, so this couple right here. All right, so the dad is healthy. They have a son who is colorblind, and they have a healthy son and a healthy daughter. Okay, well, in order to have a sick son, the mother, who's healthy, must then be a carrier of the recessive allele. So let's take a look at this video right here, or this picture right here. So we're going to focus on this side. This is essentially our cross. We had a man who's unaffected, so he is X big N Y. And we have a carrier mother. She is heterozygous. Now, the dad gives an X chromosome to his daughters. And he gives a Y chromosome to his sons. However, the mother can give an X chromosome, either of her X chromosomes, to her children. So in some cases, she might give the normal allele, but in some cases, she might give the recessive allele. Boys always get their X chromosome from their mother, okay, because the dad is the only one that can give him a Y chromosome. So the mother is giving the X chromosome to her sons. So that is why we see it, carrier women passing it on to their sons, because they get the X chromosome from their mom. Now, daughters get one X chromosome from their mom and one X chromosome from their dad. So the daughter might get the normal from her mom, or she might get the color blindness one from her mom. It would depend. Right? Next up, we have, let's go back. An affected father and an unaffected mother. So let's take a look at that. So if we have an affected father and an unaffected mother. So this would be like the other situation that we have on there. So in this case, we know that the mother has to have at least a big N. Okay? And let's look at her children. All of her children are healthy. Okay? The daughters all get their get an X chromosome from each parent. Okay, so the dad only has a sick X chromosome to give, so he only gives the colorblind allele to his daughter. So every daughter he has is now a carrier because he only has a sick X chromosome to give. Okay, the boys are all healthy. There are 3 boys. Most likely, because the mom gives an X chromosome, most likely she is X big N, X little n. But we can't be 100% sure. We would probably have to look at her parents to determine it. So in this case, they're saying that they basically did genetic testing and she is homozygous normal. But you might not necessarily be able to tell. With 5 kids, it's a good bet that she's X big N, X big N. So there we can see it here. So we have a normal, unaffected mother, but we have an affected father. So again, girls get X chromosomes from each parent. So the girls are always getting that recessive allele from their fathers. Hopefully that gives you a better idea of how sex linkage works and how we can use it to kind of predict pedigrees.